Friends, I regret beginning this episode with some grim statistics. But by the time I finish this monologue, long before my guest joins to share her personal story, 7 American women will have become the latest victims of sexual assault. In the 2 hours that this show will be broadcasting, that number will jump to a total of 60. If we include stalking and non-sexual violence, there will be 360 new victims in the time it takes me to deliver this 15-minute monologue. And by the show's end, that total will reach an unfathomable 2,880 new victims. Keep in mind that these statistics don't include incidents of sexual harassment. All of this kind of begs the question, what do these statistics tell us about being a woman in these United States of America? Moreover, what does it say about the current culture and character of our nation? Better yet, what does it say about us as a nation that so many victims of sexual assault are victimized over and over again by a culture of silence, shame, and a system of justice that so often fails them? And why is it that it is the victims who are left feeling ashamed, afraid, and embarrassed? And what perverted morals govern the construct of a society where sexual violence is even normalized? The term rape culture was coined in the 1970s to describe a social mindset that creates an environment ripe for sexual violence against women. Rape culture is defined as a set of values, beliefs, assumptions, and societal norms that subtly, or even blatantly, send a message that it's natural human behavior for men to pursue and push themselves on a woman. It's not a curable problem, and we should expect nothing different. The pervasiveness of this attitude in America is best displayed in the way that we invest so much time in teaching a woman how to keep themselves safe and avoid being victimized, but so little teaching men how to respect women and, not to assault them sexually. A few more examples of rape culture characteristics are blaming the victim. What did she think was going to happen if she went to a frat party dressed like that? Trivializing inappropriate sexual behavior. Hey, he's a guy. He wouldn't be a real man if he didn't try to hit that, right? Denying the problem of rape. Those statistics are bullshit. I bet half those accusations were just women trying to get revenge on men who made them mad. Making excuses for male sexual misconduct. Well, both of them had been drinking, so nobody was thinking straight, and things just happened. And then there's believing and perpetuating rape myths. She wasn't fighting back, so I bet she kind of liked it. These are just a few examples of the many messed up attitudes in this culture that objectifies women as sexual objects, then slut-shames them if they dare to openly enjoy sex. A culture that shrugs off assaults committed by boyfriends or husbands, because it isn't real rape. The list goes on and on. To show one personal example of how America's rape culture manifests itself to minimize sexual abuse against women, I want to share an experience that my producer Mackenzie had when she was just a little girl. At age 11, Mackenzie attended a church youth group, and there she became friends with one of the young male counselors. Now, this episode is about the separate societal problem of adults, not about the separate societal problem of adults preying on children. So we're going to skim over the details of how this counselor made Mackenzie feel special so that he could win her trust and loyalty. We're all familiar with the stories of men luring unsuspecting little girls into positions where it's easy to take advantage of them. And one afternoon, Mackenzie found herself alone with a counselor in his college dorm room, looking through a photo album of a trip he had taken to Egypt. Somehow, cool pictures of camels and temples led to inappropriate touching. And when Mackenzie ignored the behavior, unsure of how to respond and just hoping that it would stop, the man took her lack of protest as permission to go further. Fortunately, he did not go that far. But again, we'll skip the details, because the pertinent part of this story is not the action, but the reaction to the action. Even though she'd seen all the film strips teaching her that nobody is allowed to touch your swimsuit areas and that you have the right to speak up if you've been abused, Mackenzie nonetheless struggled with the decision to tattle on her friend. Now, eventually, she did work up the courage to report the counselor's behavior to the youth group staff member who seemed the safest to approach with such an uncomfortable, embarrassing problem. a female counselor who was the mother of another little girl in the club. We'll call her Mrs. Smith. This woman's response to the whispered confidences of a traumatized little girl was nothing short of appalling. She flat out told Mackenzie that what had happened was her own fault. "What did you expect?" the Mrs. Smith said. "You are all over him, sitting on his lap and holding his hand. You weren't shy about how much you liked him, so it's no surprise that he gave in to that temptation." This trusted adult's reaction to her report confused and distressed Mackenzie more than the sexual assault itself. It had never even crossed her mind that accepting gestures of innocent affection from an adult was allowing that man to view her sexually. In fact, she'd always been taught the opposite. Mackenzie knew that Mrs. Smith was treating her unfairly. Mrs. Smith promised to speak with the male counselor about being, less physical with the girls in the youth group, but she made it very clear that it was mainly Mackenzie's responsibility not to tempt him any further. "You stay away from him now," Miss Smith told her. "I don't want to see you go near him again." True to her word, Miss Smith spoke with the young man. Now, Mackenzie has no knowledge of what was said in that conversation, of course, but what she does know is that the counselor was not asked to leave his volunteer position working with children in the church. The other staff were surprised and disappointed when the man resigned of his own accord and stopped attending club meetings. During a youth group camping trip a few weeks later, Mackenzie chose not to participate when one of the counselors took the other kids off on a hike. The rest of the staff members were not aware that Mackenzie had stayed behind and was in fact hiding inside of her tent reading a book, a few feet away when they began to talk about how differently Mackenzie had been acting lately. "She probably misses her boyfriend," Mrs. Smith said. The other adults laughed and talked for a few minutes about how it was an 11-year-old child's own fault that her favorite counselor had quit. And if she'd just kept her mouth shut, everybody would have been happier. Mackenzie was left quietly crying into a pillow and hoping nobody would find out that she'd overheard them, in case they might subject her to even more ridicule. Well, there was no excuse for the cruel and irresponsible way that this group of so-called Christian adults treated a child in their care. We must acknowledge that they were also victims of a country entrenched in rape culture. What growing up in the American society of the 1950s and 60s taught them about the roles of men and women was perpetuated and passed on to a little girl growing up in the 1980s. Mackenzie, in turn, moved into adulthood without a good foundation for understanding her rights when it came to men and their sexual advances. Fortunately, Mackenzie beat the statistics and didn't become one of the many molested girls who were later raped later in life. But she, like most women, found it difficult to navigate through a world of rape culture. Women encounter a myriad of small dilemmas when it comes to dealing with sexual advances in their day-to-day life. Like, how long should I be polite and pleasant when a man pursuing me won't take a hint? Or when my coworkers sexualize me in their banter, I play along because I like being part of the gang. But what do I do when the jokes, go too far and make me feel uncomfortable? If I tell, well, they'll stop and they'll think I'm no fun and they'll exclude me. The little things are what lead to and allow the bigger things. Playful jokes and uninvited flirting all create an atmosphere that is ripe for the next step, the actual sexual assault and rape. And when the worst happens, our society has a shameful history of continuing to just shrug it off and look away. Women are well aware of this, which makes it hard for them to come forward and report crimes when they occur. Victims of sexual assault must not only endure the trauma of the violence, but they must also go through the dehumanizing process of secondary encounters, wherein their bodies are reduced to evidence, where they must relive the experience in the presence of complete strangers, subject themselves to potentially secondary risks, such as job loss or public torment, and also worry about whether their coping mechanisms conform to other people's expectations, as their identities become reduced to the role of a victim. The risks of coming forward must be weighed upon the factors that undermine the pursuit of justice, which is sadly still a relative rarity. Take, for instance, the extensive backlog and the processing of rape kits, wherein hundreds of thousands of these kits sit untested in police department storage facilities. given that there are still many jurisdictions where there aren't even systems in place for counting and tracking rape kits. The magnitude of this crisis is really largely unknown. Further, as yet, there are no federal laws mandating the tracking and testing of rape kits in the United States. Despite what the popular crime shows portray, DNA and trace evidence is not always available or of probative value in sexual assault cases. And yet, even when it is collected, but not processed, what message does this send about our nation's commitment and priorities? Proving sexual assault, even when DNA and trace evidence is available, is not a sure thing. We have a very imperfect and deeply flawed criminal justice system, where police, prosecutors, and the courts are bogged down with cases. Many times, sexual assault cases come down to a he said, she said contest. Given these facts, is it really astounding that so many victims of sexual assault choose not to come forward? One of the biggest roadblocks keeping women silent about sexual violence is simply the fact that they are women. It is often overlooked how much rape culture is fueled by persistent gender inequalities. Social perceptions of sexual violence bind and limit women's political, social, and economic rights. Feminist scholars have long viewed social norms surrounding rape as the defining features of gender equality, with rape-prone societies characterized by high levels of sex segregation, devaluation of women, and interpersonal violence. In a recent case study, Does Rape Culture Predict Rape?, conducted by the John F. Kennedy School of Government and the University of Michigan, researchers conducted the first quantitative analysis of rape culture in the United States, in which they present a theory of how rape culture might shape the preferences and choices of perpetrators, victims, and law enforcement. The findings suggest that rape culture in the media predicts both the frequency of rape and its pursuit through the criminal justice system. For instance, in jurisdictions where rape culture was more prevalent, there were, in fact, more documented rape cases, but local authorities were far less vigilant in pursuing them. Now, let's briefly address the topic of the media and its influence on rape culture in today's society. Imbalances of power have always been a pivotal issue when it comes to victimization and decisions about reporting sexual misconduct and assault. And sometimes these power imbalances are vast and sensational enough to grab the attention of the entire media. Overall, it is a good thing when the walls of silence come down and the whole country holds the likes of Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby accountable for their actions, despite their wealth, power, and clout. However, the media holds its own version of power imbalance in a way that they control the narrative and sway public opinion to comply with a status quo agenda. Frequently, which victims are believed and which are discredited is centered around the type of public figure who is being accused. If the perpetrator is an entertainer, it's easy for the media to give the accusations the weight and serious consideration that they deserve. But the story changes when the perpetrator is a politician who belongs to the party that the media wants and needs to keep on its side, namely the right-leaning corporate Democrats. Donald Trump was way off base with most of his outrageous and aggressive blustering, but he wasn't entirely wrong when he said that the mainstream media was against him and called the reports fake news. And you'll hear us say again and again on this show, the media is no longer the unbiased source of information that it was meant to be. And when America's status quo is threatened, it is the media's sworn duty to present the facts as they want them to believe and manipulate their Democratic base to fall in step with the party line. No matter what your opinion is about Tara Reade's accusations of sexual assault against then presidential candidate Joe Biden, you cannot deny that the media treated her story very differently than their shocked dismay over the many sexual-related complaints about Trump, or their eruption of outrage against Brett Kavanaugh when he was similarly accused. During Biden's presidential run and beyond, any and all complaints of inappropriate behavior, or worse, were dismissed outright as lacking credibility, without full attention being given to the evidence, or Biden's behavior simply went unreported by the media. It turns out that not all sexual assault is created equal in these United States of America. In fact, we have a United States of selective denial, but I imagine we'll be covering this topic in greater depth later on in the show. I'd like to conclude my monologue with a ray of hope. But hope is hard to find in a situation where America is actively trying to become better, and yet is still so widely missing the mark. Well, the Me Too movement represents a much-needed time of reckoning for powerful men who have capitalized upon their positions to prey upon women, as well as promoting a broader awareness of sexual violence and its myriad of psychological impacts. It has also been problematic in many ways. There still exists a cultural framing of sexual violence that regurgitates what, lacking a better term, I'll call rape mythology. Furthermore, the Me Too movement has failed to address the cultural, political, institutional, and obscure processes of compartmentalization that more broadly contribute to the discourse of harm and definitions of sexual violence. It is not nearly enough to just center these discussions and interventions around the perpetrators and victims of sexual violence. We must also assess the socio-cultural factors and partake in a critical analysis relating to the systemic cycle of responsibility that falls upon the whole of society, looking at the way sexual violence is orchestrated, ignored, normalized, and excused. This is not a problem only for the victims to confront. It is a crisis that our entire society must address. If our nation truly wishes to confront and reduce sexual violence, we must first advance our understanding of it and the conditions that enable it, beginning by looking at our own biases and prejudices. And that, my friends, is the final word up front. I'm Sean Sainhart, and this is Coup Save America. My guest today is an actress, activist, podcaster, and in my book, hero, who's also an author whose entire life has come under attack, vicious attack in fact, when she bravely came forward to share how she had been sexually violated by then Senator Joe Biden. The always brilliant and courageous Tara Reid joins me to share her own story of combating rape culture, and in the middle of a presidential campaign. Her published memoir, Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, documents her journey through a culture that frames truth through the biased lens of political partisanship and the rape culture that re-victimizes women over and over again. We'll be right back. Please, if you're watching this live, be sure to click that like button, and if you subscribe to our podcast and channel, please make sure that you click on the like buttons there too. And you can visit our website for links to all the various platforms at CoupSaveAmerica.com, and we're going to be right back with Tara Reid. And joining me in just a few minutes is Tara Reid. But first, I want to talk about her book. Can we go ahead and put that up on the screen, Mackenzie? This is an incredible book, and I encourage everyone to read it. It is a fascinating memoir, and we're going to be talking to Tara about that. I just want people to copy down this link. And again, I read this book, I think it took me about three days or so. It was a wonderful book, well written. It really goes through a process that I think will help people understand rape culture, understand what it's like to have to go through the trauma and the attacks and the feelings of guilt and shame that go along with that. So please, you can buy this book in both Kindle and hardcover on Amazon.com. Go to TaraReidAuthor.com to buy the book. You can find links there. And joining me right now, I'm so excited, is Tara Reid.
Hi.
Hi. Great.
Here,
Thank you.
I needed to adjust my camera there.
Thank you so much, so much for coming on.
Oh,
the show.
sure. Yeah. Here,
I have been an admirer of yours quite some time. I love your podcast. You're absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
I think that we need to hear more voices like yours, because what happened to you, and I didn't even know, all I knew is what I had seen play out on the media. Reading your book and hearing about I mean, oh my God, I was crying through the first part of your book. I was so outraged.
Oh,
So first off, I apologize for all of the way that, I mean, it's mind-boggling that people would treat you or anybody. I mean, they threatened your child, your daughter, your cat. At one point, they even went after your horse.
yes, I know. Yeah.
I mean, what the hell is the matter with people?
Um, yeah, it's not people. It was a very coordinated attack, and Joe Biden's campaign, spent $2.2 million to silence my story alone, according to FEC.
Really?
That's not including the money he spent to silence the Hunter Biden laptop story. So, it's a very corrupt system. And I came actually forward before he was even a viable candidate.
Right.
As everyone knows. So,
yeah, and by the way, in case a lot of people don't know this, but you are not, by any stretch, the only person to have accused him of sexual assault and sexual misconduct.
no,
And yet the media,
and there's two other women who haven't come forward, who may never come forward because of how I was treated, and there's 7 women that came forward, and there's varying degrees of the severity of what happened, but there's 2 to 3 that I know of, and that have other people know of. And then there's just kind of other things that have swirling around. Like there's a very prominent newscaster's wife who was hugged and held to Joe Biden's body kind of inappropriately in a receiving line when he was vice president. And that newscaster said to me that Biden's behavior was a well-known secret. Well, if it was a well-known secret, then, why aren't people talking about it out loud? Because there were plenty of other candidates in the Democratic field to choose from. I'd really just, to this day, I don't understand the collusion around it, which is seconded only by the collusion that was around Cuomo and what those Cuomo survivors went through. So,
Yeah, what struck me immediately when your story first came out was that your credibility wasn't even given time to be assessed. It was automatically, I mean, and I guess I should also ask you when you colluded with Russian President Putin for this whole thing. I mean, to me, the absurdity of that was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I did not know this about the female anatomy, but I did not know that if you had ever said anything nice about Russia or Putin, that you couldn't be raped. I'm like, well, why doesn't everybody just love Putin then? Seems like a great defense. It was just so ludicrous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that Russophobia, that sort of bigotry has been going on for a while. I got in trouble because in 2017, I had written what's considered a pro-Russian essay. And I was writing a novel and I did a lot of research, and it really changed my opinion about what I thought about, because we're so brainwashed here in the US, we're brainwashed to think a certain way about Vladimir Putin. And then I started really doing a deep dive because of the novel, and it really opened my eyes. Well, I always anti-imperialist, but really opened my eyes of how they were vilifying him. And that was right around the time Rachel Maddow was on everyone's living room, just pounding that Russophobia myth, like day in, day out, and CNN and MSNBC and all of those major media, corporate media, we're just doing the bidding of the US State Department. And if you notice, most of the people they have on their shows are all former CIA operatives or work for the State Department. Yeah. Or like, for instance, I interned for Leon Panetta. He's now on the board for one of the major weapons manufacturers. So of course they're wanting war, and they want this proxy war that the US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine. But I think more and more people are waking up and saying, wait a second, another $1 billion going there, another billions going to weapons, and nothing for the US citizens. And this is being done without consent. Well, I tried to tell everyone, Joe Biden's not really big on consent. He's arrogant and he's awful. And, I tried to speak up about it. I tried to come forward in 1993. I didn't go to the media, but I tried to go through Senate protocol and report what happened. And, there's also a police report. And that report, the harassment report and such, I wanted to tell the whole thing and talk to somebody in person. But the process then was very weird. and bureaucratic. They've changed it since then because of so many people being victim of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and hush money was being used in some cases. So they've changed that process. But when I was there, the process that was there was very inadequate. And the complaint that I filed is allegedly sealed in the University of Delaware.
Right. And
Um,
Joe Biden, by the way, had a chance to unseal that. And I
he
remember when
wouldn't.
he wouldn't do it. And his response was, well, I'm afraid there might be embarrassing things that come out. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think it's just my complaint. I think there's other complaints. There's also foreign policy. I think that he's been, and this is my opinion, but I think there's been an abuse of power and corruption for a long time, and a
Oh,
lot of it would be revealed with
well, I mean,
opening those files.
there's DuPont, his history with DuPont family and corporation.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, when I was working there, I was in charge of interns, and one of my jobs was to go through resumes, and so I kind of put up a red flag. Hey, there's no minorities, there's no women, there's no diversity in this office. And I had a meeting with the chief of staff, and they said, because they had VIPs, and the VIPs were the DuPont children, and they weren't just DuPont children of employees; they were the DuPont people on the board of DuPont. So the super rich, the uber, right, on the board of this company DuPont, it was their kids, mostly white male, right? Um,
of
and
course.
I remember one of those interns had a handmade, like a tailor-made suit delivered to the office for himself. I mean, that was the kind of wealth, right? This, young person had. And so the chief of staff relented and let me say, and said 50%. So 50% could be diverse hires. And so I was able to hire some campaign workers, and I was able to, try to get introduced diversity. But Joe Biden's always been racist. He just made a racist remark today, which is now going viral.
Oh, I
Another
missed it.
one.
You'll have to
Like,
tell. What
he's just
was
a
it?
gaffe machine.
What was it today? I missed it.
He was making a speech. He said a lot of horrible things. I mean, I think YouTube content creators are going to be busy for a while. There was like at least 4 clips that I saw that were just cringeworthy. But of course, he was doubling down on, funding the police, that he wanted to
Oh,
do that.
right. Yeah.
So there was that clip. And then there's the clip about, he told the story about the pool again. He
You're
left up
kidding.
the pop, but his phrase was, he hung out in East Delaware. He was the only white guy, and boy, he could tell you where every good basketball court was. Just making a blatantly racist remark. Nothing to see there, right? And then and in the same breath, he's calling Magno supporters neo-fascists, and I don't,
Oh, right.
right?
Well, the thing about that I find interesting is that the road to fascism kind of begins with neoliberalism.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't want to hear this, and this kind of goes back to, again, the issue I think with your coming forward was again partisan, entirely partisan, and this even goes back really to speaking of rape culture, Hillary Clinton.
Oh
And
yeah.
the way that she has gone after her husband's victims and dismissed that. And she's
Oh
also,
yeah. Have you ever talked to any of the people that have dealt with the Clintons? I mean, with the Epstein, with some of those victims. If you've talked, they were not given any chance at all. And then, of course, I think the only one that seems to be okay, and I consider her a victim because she was so young and naive, but Monica Lewinsky, I think that was so gross, and the way she was, but Juanita Broderick was raped by him, and there's a police report, and it's in a congressional thing. The details of it, and she was threatened by Hillary, and she talked about it actually, and when I had a conversation with her publicly, and she described, what happened. Hillary Clinton's no joke. The Clintons are no joke. They are very scary people.
yeah,
And they will do anything to hold on to power.
oh, no kidding. And that kind of gets me to the next point. This whole Russophobia is all about, again, I think you had 2 things going against you. One was that there was the whole Democrat issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was And look, I never fell for this Russiagate about Trump. I mean
Mhm.
that, and people don't seem to understand that that was a Hillary orchestrated. I don't want to use the word witch hunt, but I'm going to use the word witch hunt. I mean, there's a lot that we should have gone after Trump for,
Yeah.
but this whole Russia thing started, and that leads us into the crisis with Ukraine.
Right.
Uh,
And I mean, it's all this is really about. I'm sort of the microcosm of the macrocosm of
yes,
what's really going on collectively, which is this narrative to hang on to Western hegemony, to a unipolar world, and that means America good, Russia bad, right? Like that's how it's almost like just a very simple formula. And their playbook is like, for instance, in my case, so we'll take it to my personal case, because of what happened to me, I was vilified, right? So even if you believed me in any way, they made me such a villain in the press that you didn't care what happened to me. And that's the tactic they use with individual people and with whole countries and with countries' leaders that they don't like or that's not following the narrative. Tulsi Gabbard was accused of being a Russian asset.
I know, by Hillary
Oh my
Clinton and
God,
all.
that's ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. She's, a veteran and very clearly, but you know what? She exposed the DNC and embarrassed them about Bernie Sanders. She stuck up for Bernie Sanders and said they did something illegal, and she shouted it out. And from that moment on, she became a target for the Democratic National Committee. And in my case, besides Joe Biden's campaign directly spending that money, the Democratic National Committee unleashed troll farms through. They have like super PACs, like Really America is one, where there's like one, for instance, one Twitter dude, I forget his name, like Brooklyn Dad or something like
Oh
that,
my God,
who
I
was
know who you're talking about.
exposed. Yeah. He was paid
Yeah,
30 grand a month. So he was going after me. He was going after Cuomo survivors. Well, there's a reason why he was doing that. He was getting paid a lot of money to tweet.
he's still doing it.
He's awful. I mean, but he's paid. I mean, like those kind of people like Sally Albright, Brooklyn Dad, that Really America, some of those DNC, you can recognize them. Now I have who just started going after me was Elliot Higgins, who's MI6, right? He has Bellingcat.
Oh, Bellingcat.
Last week
Yeah.
they started going after me, the NAFO trolls, they call them NAFO trolls, with their little dogs, and they are they go after certain people that are anti-imperialist. Doesn't matter what your politics are. It's just if you're anti-imperialist, if you're not supporting this, money laundering effort in Ukraine, they are going after you. So yeah, I mean, and these people are paid. They're paid to harass, but they go after you in very vicious ways. Like in my case, it didn't just stay on the internet, right? It jumped, right? Anyone who supported me, they would contact their employer, they would contact their friends. One of the people that was a witness to what happened, in other words, I told her what happened to me like right after it happened. Her divorce and her bankruptcy was spread all over social media after she made a public appearance. So they're vicious. Anthony Zankis is an expert in trauma. He's a professor at Columbia and another university. They went after his job. They tried to get him fired. They did an email campaign. They tried to have me put in prison for perjury.
Oh, I remember
I was
that.
an expert witness. So yeah, it's dangerous and it's awful.
And this is again this is, and people don't understand this. This rape culture thing. I mean, this just further helps the perpetrators. I mean, this is just it's just
Well,
the
and
way
if you notice in my book, one person that's really pushed back that I want to give credit to more than any other prominent figure I've seen is Rose McGowan. She is
yes.
beyond brave. Which is Brave is the name of her book, so people should go get that book because it's really, really illuminating and great. She's been calling the political parties in America cults before anyone did.
I was
Um,
just looking for
yeah.
that quote that she had in your book. I love that. Go ahead and tell us what that quote is, because I love it.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
America is the scariest cult I have ever been in. And yeah, no, I I
She was
highlighted
a
that.
survivor of cults, so she knows what they are. So yeah.
She's absolutely right. and it's
Yeah,
getting
she was.
worse.
And you know, it's cost her a lot. I mean, she had an album called Planet Nine. So if anyone wants to listen to that, it has theta beats, which if you're into healing and meditation, theta beats, or even just studying, actually, they're good when you're trying to study or focus on a project. Her music has theta beats in it. It's really great. You put on your earphones and you meditate to it, and it's really innovative. But it's Planet Nine. But anyway, they they really tanked her. She was trying to get that music out, and because she was so supportive of me and outspoken about me and some other things, she got tanked. And New York Times made so much money off of her. They got a Pulitzer off of her, and then they just started, going after her. So it was really, like you said, it was very partisan. It was very much rape culture. She was fighting her battle for a decade before I came forward about Weinstein. So
Yeah, and I wanted to put this in my monologue. It just went too long, but one of the things that was really got me, statistic, was the suicide rate among women who have been raped, which is higher than any other crime, and certainly higher than those who have not been victim of a crime. It's an epidemic of silence. I mean, just
and shame.
and shame. And it's
Yeah.
the shame should be on the perpetrators and the media. What the media did to you. I mean, publishing your social security number.
Yeah.
I mean, that was intentional.
Yeah.
There's no way that wasn't intentional.
Oh, I know. I know it was. They say it was an accident, but it was very intentional. And it did. I mean, think about it. They published my mother's maiden name, my birth date, my social security number. Well, if you wanted to stalk me,
Right.
they were just given all the tools by the New York Times. And I just, and I've been fighting a battle with the New York Times about it. We're going into an appeal. I'm appealing because I'm upset about the damage it's done to my credit and to all kinds of things in my life. And so we'll see what happens. But I have been so shocked. I mean, I was so naive. I just thought that there were certain reporters that just were really reporters. I didn't realize the depth of the grift.
Well, I mean, it was the Me Too movement, right? I mean, it was a
Yeah.
time of empowerment. So
I thought I would have all of that
Yeah.
around me, and no women's groups helped me at all.
Talk about Time's Up too, because that was what really just set me off in the book. Just
I went to Time's Up initially before I even, before I was really in the media. The sexual harassment was coming forward and all of that was bubbling, but I wanted protection around me before I got into the assault, like really publicly. And so in January, I went to Time's Up of that year. And so it was 2019. So I think it was January 2020 then. It all went by so fast. I don't know. And then I reached out, and Anita Dunn, unbeknownst to me, was already on Joe Biden's campaign payroll. I didn't know that. And she's the founder of Time's Up. And Time's Up is this organization that's supposed to help women with their legal case. And so there's two prongs to it. There's the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. There's Time's Up. I applied for help for getting an attorney. And they also have PR, the public relations, that they help you with dealing with the fallout, like all the stuff that I had to deal with, right? So I was accepted to the legal program, but then they said, oh, well, we just don't want to get political about the PR. They just wouldn't do it. And they were dancing around it. Come to find out, they were dancing around why, and they didn't tell me why. They made up some reason that wasn't even valid. And Ryan Grimm from The Intercept exposed it. Anita Dunn's firm did their PR, and she was already working for Biden. They already had a conflict of interest, and they didn't tell me about the conflict of interest. And they've done this to other women with powerful men. They've had these alliances with powerful men. They did it with Cuomo. They had private communications with Cuomo's staff of how to discredit Lindsey Boylan, about the strategy they would use. They were basically set up, this nonprofit, to go to be a catch and kill, so to speak, which is the title of Ronan Farrow's book. But they were like a catch and kill for powerful men. Here, these women go for help. So what happened? Joe Biden's campaign got all my story, right? Any kind of witnesses, anything going on. They had all that information. I handed it to them, not knowing.
Yeah, I mean,
So
your
then
brother even.
they've been since dismantled, and the criminal investigation into Cuomo revealed their corruption, some of their corruption. Tina Chen, like the day that they rejected my PR, went, and she used to work for Obama. She went and campaigned for Biden to a campaign function that night, that same day, for Joe Biden. And they all like have lunch and talk to each other. And Anita Dunn was the White House senior counsel, or excuse me, senior advisor, not counsel, senior advisor for Biden for several months. And then when the scandal broke about, what they were doing, and Time's Up was dismantled, she had to step down because it was revealed. And I think more would have been revealed had she stayed there. I mean, I think more stuff would have come out, like White House visits, who she would, because it was during the Cuomo thing. Cuomo went and saw Biden, if you remember. There were some meetings, probably Anita Dunn was there. And, it's like double dipping, right? She's getting federal money as this White House advisor, and she's running a PR firm and getting millions. It's such corruption. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and
So
this again, it really shows the partisanship of our media, which
yeah,
is to me completely antithetical to being to a free press, right? I mean,
this is not a safe time for
no.
victims. It's not for whistleblowers. Look at Julian Assange. He's not a whistleblower, but he's a publisher and a media, so it's not a good time for a real publisher. And for whistleblowers, it's not safe. Like, Edward Snowden, for example, Daniel Hale. And then for personal situations like my own, like the sexual assault, like for me coming forward, it was definitely not safe. People have often asked me, what do you recommend for, survivor? And I don't really know what to say right now, because right now I don't feel comfortable saying, oh yeah, tell your story. There should be no shame, because the reality is you have to be prepared for the fact that your life will be under a microscope, not the powerful person, and that you will lose everything most likely unless you have resources to defend yourself, and if you don't have those resources to defend yourself properly, you're screwed.
Well, and also too, just the emotional support, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, like in your case too. I mean, they went after your family. I mean,
Yeah.
it was exhausting for everyone involved. I mean, for yourself especially.
Yeah, and it caused, friction with
Yeah,
family, of course. And there were some family members that didn't know, because I hadn't told them. So it was a surprise. And, so yeah, it was a whole thing. Now, close family members knew, but like I'm talking about cousins or whatever. But they contacted I kid you not, they contacted my first boyfriend from high school. Okay. They contacted my high school drama teacher. And I don't even know if she remembered me. She was like 80s and she's not, clear or whatever. Who knows what she said? I don't even know. They didn't print it, but like my first boyfriend was defending me, and then he reached out to me and I had a conversation, and he's married and stuff. But like, I just like, I felt bad. It was embarrassing. Like, it was just horrible.
well, and two, I mean, I think what first kind of got me emotionally in your book, I think, was when you told the story about, you were just kind of sitting around your house. I think you were drinking tea, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and it was your daughter saying, "Mom, are you okay? Are you okay?" And
No, I
you
was
had
drinking
no idea.
coffee. Yeah.
Coffee, yeah. And you had no idea that this story had blown up. I mean, it just kind of, and your trust was so violated in that way too, with the media, that you came to. I mean, that was talk about stalking and manipulation. I mean, what those reporters did to you, befriending you, gaining your trust, and then, I mean, that to me was just like you. And this one of them was a female reporter too, who should have known better.
Yeah. You're talking about the Washington Post, Beth Reinhardt.
Yes.
She was horrendous. I mean, I had this respect for her because she was a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I thought, whatever. I thought this was going to be a very well balanced. I didn't know if she believed me, I mean, you never know, but like, and I never knew that with Rich McHugh, who did some really good stories about what happened to me. I don't know if he believed me personally, but he was very objective and he just kind of laid out facts. And that's how it's supposed to be. But yeah, she went at me like right out the gate. And then she said horrible things that I don't want to really get into here, but you can see in my book, it
Yes.
had me pretty much curled in a ball crying. And then, you know, I mean, but there were some brave reporters, and I want to emphasize that Ryan Grimm, you know, from The Intercept, you know, he stuck with it. He even like did another piece about, you know, the New York Times not backing down, or CNN not backing down after they misprint. You know, they said I lied about my education and I didn't, and they still haven't retracted it to this day. He called it out. You know, you had Law and Crime that went after Time's Up, and tried to reveal that. And Hillary Rosen, by the way, who works for Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, called the editor in chief of Law and Crime and threatened to sue them, and went through it line by line, and then said, basically ordered them, there would be no more stories about Tara Reade during the campaign. So yeah, these people, they think they own everything, and they think they can just have conversations like that. They can call up a media company and say, you're not going to do that story.
Yeah, and Katie Halper too.
Yeah, they did that they pressured Katie Halper. Katie Halper was wonderful. She was very, and it's the first time I think she'd done that, because she's not a journalist. She's a comedian and a podcaster, and she works with Matt Taibbi, and she works with Aaron Mate, some really fine investigative journalists. But you know, that, and looking back now at like where she was in that point, she took so much heat for you know,
and she still does. She's you know,
she's very brave.
Yes, very brave, very on top of things, not afraid to, and that to me, she is a journalist. She is more of a journalist.
She is. But whenever I call her a journalist, she always like, no, Tara, I'm not a journalist, you know. So that's why I say that whenever I did say that. And so, but yet she does. She has the integrity of a journalist, a true journalist, not a stenographer like what we see in corporot media. And I do know she got trolled, she got attacked, she got so much flack.
Well, you know, it doesn't bother me when this happens, because I just ignore these people. But for a long time, I'm on Facebook mostly, and it just drives me crazy, the failure to be objective. And every time that I've defended you and mentioned you, or you can't even slightly criticize a Democrat or Joe Biden. You can't say anything when you talk like this, the so-called gaffes, right?
Right.
That's what it's gaffes. When Donald Trump does it, it's outright racism, but when Joe does it, it's gaffes. It's like the excuses that people will throw is really
not. You know what? It's even go further though. It's not excuses. It's a very pointed attempt to control a narrative. And they will use money and people to do it. I mean, I found out that personally that there were people, acquaintances, right? People I didn't really know that well, that were paid to talk terrible about me, right? In 2 instances, I discovered that they were given money. And that's, I mean, how do you combat that? How do you deal with that? Like that kind of corruption is unprecedented. The fact that they did so much to silence me tells you everything you need to know. And you know, if people are so brainwashed that they think that this is how America should be, this is how we're living right now, our infrastructure crumbling right now in Mississippi, millions of people don't have water. Okay, like our infrastructure is being destroyed by neglect and abuse of these elites, and they're sending they just sent 2 days ago 3 billion more to Ukraine in weapons, and they're just enriching themselves.
But we can only means test things like student debt cancellation. That has to be means tested, and we have to make sure that we do. It can't be more than 20,000. Yeah. I mean, how many times have we bailed out Wall Street? How many wars, or can we even call them wars, because they're not really declared?
Yeah, and the Republicans and Democrats do this dance. They work off each other to keep people distracted and make them feel like it's a football game, red team, blue team, and which team are you on? And they're the good guys. No, they're the good guys. And they keep people engaged. And it's all folly. It's theater, right?
Yep.
Because the elites have hedged their bets on both parties. The elites are this small group of people that have 85% of the US wealth are calling the shots, and the rest of us are not. And George Carlin said it years ago.
Yes,
He was
I love
right.
George Carlin. Absolutely.
Yeah.
More right than I think he even I mean, talk about foresight. I mean, he really saw what was coming. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. And again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about. You cannot, you either, and Donald Trump was a gift to the Democratic Party. He really was.
Oh yeah.
Because to both
They need a
parties, really.
real enemy,
Yeah,
right?
and he provided it. And really, if you look at the policies, the Democrats did not oppose his agenda per se. It was, I think, and I say this a lot of time on, like I'll say on Facebook, he was truthful in his cruelty, right? He exposed the cruelty in a way that was just unacceptable to the ruling class.
Yeah.
And it, but you're right. He is a perfect enemy, and they don't have to do a damn thing. They just have to dangle that. Oh well, you don't want Donald Trump again, do you?
And they're going to do it again. In
Yeah.
fact, yesterday, I guess Joe Biden filed to run for president in 2024.
Which he promised he was going to be a one-term
He
president.
did.
Of course,
But he promised a lot of things, didn't he? He
Yeah,
promised
he's a
to
liar.
cancel all student debt. He promised to not get us in another endless war. He promised, yeah, whatever. He's not worth, I mean, he's an empty suit.
Well, he's been a pathological liar his entire life, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that comes out of his mouth is not to be believed, and there's evidence of this. This is not These
Yeah.
are not opinions. I mean, he has lied and lied and lied so many times, but when Donald Trump does it, and I'm not defending Donald Trump, right? Neither are you, but it just seems like the hypocrisy here, and people that, to me, even friends that I have that seem like rational people in the real world, you start getting about Joe Biden, and all of a sudden they go nuts. Oh, he's not racist.
I know
He's not
it's
racist at
interesting
all.
because when I in one thread like 2 weeks ago, I was called a Republican and a communist in the same thread. And I was kind of laughing to myself like, wow, like these are pretty juxtaposed position, but okay. And the truth of the matter is I'm not politically affiliated right now with anyone. I stopped obviously being a Democrat. I stopped working for them and whatnot. But like I just I like anti-imperialist like Alan Grayson's a good dude. Tulsi Gabbard is good. I don't think she can run as a Democrat ever again because she tried to sue Hillary for Hillary calling her a
Yeah.
Russian agent.
Oh, I
And
love that,
because
though.
of what they did to Bernie. I think she might, if she ran as an independent, that would be something. Because I think she'd pull from Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
She would be that would be unique.
Who else do you see on the landscape?
Well, I mean, the Green Party, the system is set up to keep the third party out and not viable. Now there's talk that Bernie might run again, but Bernie voted for the war. He voted for this proxy war against Russia. He voted for the weapons to go to Ukraine. So I don't really feel the same way I did about Bernie. I mean, I liked him. He was cool, but I was never a Bernie, whatever, like all in, because there were things I saw. He was friends with Biden. He kept saying how good friends he was with Biden. I was like, okay, whatever. Like,
and that too was like,
who sexually assaulted me. I don't want to hear about Biden. So,
look at how Joe Biden has even treated him during the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Friend?
He treats him. He kicks him around like a dog. I don't know why he does that. I don't know why Bernie keeps going back for more, except that he has some sort of alliance. But I don't know what that is. So I can't speak. I don't even remember when I was working there. There was no contact between that I saw much of any between the offices. I mean, actually, Joe Biden was really close friends with Orrin Hatch. That was one of his best friends. And so
Joe Biden hasn't met a Republican he hasn't loved.
In fact, he would vote with Orrin Hatch unless a staff member stopped him. They'd go have lunch together or something, and he'd come back and he'd start to vote. And then some staff would be raising his hand, don't vote there, because he didn't care. He didn't really read the bills. I mean, and the ones that he did sponsor are the ones he was like, he's always been a puppet. He was always called, they used to call him a lightweight back in the day.
Well, he's not very intelligent. I mean, he really isn't.
No, he's not.
I say that, but he's not.
He's into the flash of it. He was never into, like, Panetta was serious. Like when I worked for him, he would be in there. He'd be reading all the information. He would be really into it. And, he went on with his career. But Joe Biden was always just about the party, and even though they said he doesn't drink, he partied. He was into the whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
the scene.
The other contrast, speaking of partying, it goes back to the son. I mean, anytime you mention Hunter, Russian propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we have gone to a point in this country where it is now, I mean, the left loves to say that the right is in a cult. Well, there's two cults, and they both serve the same master, really.
Yeah.
And it's imperialism in this country, and I don't know. I don't have a lot of hope that we're going to get out of this, because so many voters are just, and I'll be honest with you, I did vote for, it was very hard for me to vote for Hillary. And I kind of told myself, okay, I'm not going to vote for her again. If she gets elected, I'm not going to vote for her to get reelected. That was kind of my deal. I did not vote for Joe Biden, and
well, I mean, I think seeing her laugh and the sociopathic reaction about Gaddafi and then her involvement with that. Yeah. And, no one wants to talk about this, but, my mother, when she was young, lived in Libya, by the way. So it's not like I haven't heard about Libya and Saudi Arabia and all these places. Like, I was raised in a household that was my mom was very political and very involved and very interesting. She was an artist, but I mean, she was very, up on current events and very vocal and she was anti-war and whatnot. And she was a member at one point she was a Democrat, but she was also a member of the Progressive Labor Party, and
right.
Very involved with the anti-Vietnam movement and getting boys to Canada and things like that, because we were in Wisconsin. And she was very involved with the Committee Against Racism as well in Chicago. And she told me that Libya had free education, they had free medical care, they had an infrastructure that was working, and now they have open air slave markets after the U.S. got done decimating that country.
And that's what we do, though. That's I mean, any place. I mean, this whole attack on socialism, right? I mean, first off, Americans don't have any concept of what communism and socialism is. It's just evil, bad. That's all. I mean, that's all it means to them. These labels.
Well, I think what you're touching on is really interesting, but also there's this dehumanization that's really happening, and it's happening in both parties. And you said earlier, you made the point that neoliberalism leads to fascism. And I think that's the issue, right? Like, a lot of the rhetoric and propaganda that came during the time of the Nazis was around dehumanizing first, right? They did the dehumanizing and the vilifying, and then they went into solutions, right? In their minds. So that's the danger. I mean, we're supporting Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, the founder of the kill site, the Ukraine kill site, like I just had Igor Lopotonek on, who was born in Ukraine, former Soviet Union, and talked about this coup, 8 years ago when the war actually started, when that was American backed. And so now you have this website going forward. He's on the kill list, as well as Oliver Stone, Roger Waters.
Yeah, Roger Waters, who was just added.
And I mean, and you know what? In response to that, Biden gave $3 billion more to Ukraine. There's no conversation about the fact they have a 13-year-old child on that kill list, and that people have actually died. It's not just a kill list, people have died. And like Daria Dugina was just assassinated.
Yes.
She was on it. They crossed off her pictures and they put liquefied.
Yeah.
Those are
Liquefied.
Nazis.
Yeah, liquefied is the word.
Those are Nazis. And the founder, by the way, of that website Igor was talking about was the founder of Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazi battalion in Ukraine. Same guy.
I had not heard that part.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this website.
That's who's behind this website.
Yep, the website's still up. No big deal.
Yep. And Ava Bartlett's on it. She's in Ukraine. Imagine how frightening that is. Yeah.
Sabi Sab said that you got. I just found this out yesterday that you had gotten banned from Spotify.
Yeah.
And yet, this website, not that it's on Spotify, but it's the contrast. It's like you're more of a threat than a website that actually advocates for killing. And we're talking about killing anyone who speaks out against Ukraine.
Right.
It's just appalling.
It's mind-boggling.
I mean, if Spotify wanted to, if this was about a moral character, they're a company that I believe they're associated with Google.
Yeah.
They could launch a campaign and get this website shut down.
They could.
I'd much rather go after anti-war voices like yourself and Chris Hedges. I don't know how Jimmy Dore and is still on, because he really tends to go after the.
Yeah, he does. I don't know. He has, but he is. Certain people have been able to not,
Yeah,
been able to get through that. But I don't know how long they have. Right. Well, so many have been demonetized. Yeah, like Wyatt Reed is a reporter, investigative reporter who is anti-war, but he just got demonetized. Like, he has no access to his bank account and PayPal, ways his work was supported as an independent journalist. So that's what they're doing is, if you're independent and you're an investigative reporter and you're not, writing down talking points from the US State Department or NATO, they'll just take away your bank account, sanction, whatever.
Yeah. And
that's it.
That again goes right back to what you were saying too, kind of back and anytime that you mention Nazi Germany, people get, oh, you're hyperbolic and blah blah blah. But there's a historical trajectory that we're ignoring. And fascism is not going to be defeated at the ballot box. No. It's certainly, and nobody wants to understand that Donald Trump, I often say Donald Trump is a symptom. Neoliberalism and this capitalist class, that's the disease. We have a very, I mean, the whole of our society is hanging on by a thread. And I mean, look at climate change. Look at all of these different crises that are coming up. And it's really hard to be hopeful because we're not going to vote our way out of this. And when it comes to fascism, and people don't want to hear this, but this whole neoliberalism really kind of got launched by Donald Trump. I mean, it occurred under Reagan, to some degree under Carter, but it was not Donald Trump, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton in the third way. All of that led to Donald Trump. Same with Obama. Obama was a neoliberal. He masqueraded as a progressive, but a lot of his policies were neoliberal. And what we got from that was Donald Trump. And when we talk about neoliberalism, we're talking about the trade deals that decimated jobs in this country. And yeah, there's a lot of racism that came, but again, that racism is a symptom of these various causes. And if people are not willing to recognize this, right? And that's one of the things I wanted to do with this show. I try to do on Facebook. I try to engage with everybody, no matter what their opinion is. And it's so hard to do because a lot of times people don't want to have objective conversations, and they don't want to hear about their own party or about the people that they're fond of. I mean,
or you're engaging with someone who's a paid troll. So,
Yeah, well, I suspect that's probably.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's a lot right now. There's a lot in that landscape, and I'm not a fan of billionaires like Elon Musk at all. But like, he did expose for people that weren't paying attention, because we already knew, but he's exposing that, they're making their money off troll farms and these anonymous accounts that are going after citizens and harassing them. And they're making a great deal of money off of that. So it does need to be exposed. I don't know why there's not more investigative reporting on it, but there's not. So there should be.
Yeah, Kamala Harris has troll farms, paid troll farms.
Oh, yes. K-Hive has been following me since 2019. And so is Sally Albright and all of those fun people.
How is that even legal for a politician to have troll farms? Which is, to me, well, again, I know it's illegal. Why it's illegal,
It's hard because you know what they do is they do it a step away. So what they do is like what the DNC does. They don't have the troll farm. They fund a super PAC, and the super PAC has a billionaire who gives them money to then purchase someone else, then purchases the troll farm. You see, it's like 3 or 4 layers removed, kind of like the mafia, right? You want something done, you remove it from the head, right?
The
so the
mafia
head
is a
never
little
gets
bit more above board, I think, than our politicians at this point.
It's rather diabolical. But it's a tactic that has been working for them because it's been allowed to work. Eventually it won't. So eventually enough people will push back and it won't.
Oh, we got a comment from a viewer. Listeners may want to know at some point in time, Google police officers have, it's coming a little messed up. It looks like, yeah, in some states, police officers are allowed to have voluntary sex with people in their custody.
Yeah, well, that's horrible. I mean, that's just, yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's an abuse. That could be an abuse of power, just like in the Senate and the House. Like if your boss, right, is doing that, even as it gets set, the whole issue wraps around consent. How consensual is it if you lose your career if you don't participate, right?
Right. Well, you had a good friend who was basically kicked out of someone's car in the middle of the night and just disappeared, basically.
Yeah, I haven't said who that is, but it's someone well known, and someday. But I don't have her express permission.
Right.
And I really am a believer that unless, the victim or survivor gives expressly their permission, I don't feel comfortable. So,
but one of the things that you mentioned in the book too, though, is that at that time, and I would imagine even that's true today to some extent, there was this culture back then where that was just acceptable. It was just everybody knew, and politicians would just flaunt abuse their power, and
it was almost like they had candy on their arms, right? Like that's how we were viewed. And I didn't really know that. I mean, I should have, but again, I was a little naive. I had this altruistic political activist mom who I thought, like, I don't know, I kind of had the same mentality that I wanted to go make change. And I thought, well, working within the system, because back then that's how the thought was, you work within the system to make positive change, right? No, if the system is corrupt, you're just going to be either a victim of the corruption or participant, right? It's very difficult to break it down, so to speak. So, yeah, it was women were very much objectified. It was before Me Too was in the vernacular, and women didn't have a lot of power either politically back then as well. So, you had kind of a confluence of two things happening there at once. And, I was in my 20s and, had been acting and modeling and stuff. And I was used to being somewhat objectified, although I didn't like it. I thought going into this field, into DC, I was going to be using my mind more and doing more. And that became quickly clear that's not why I was hired for Biden's office. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you... also, too, I mean, you had been with Leona Panetta and had a
and as an internship, and there was none of that nonsense there. I mean, like there was no vibe like that at all. But in other offices, there were. So, sadly,
I'm with you on this, but I've heard you say, and I've heard other people say too, that there's no reforming the Democratic Party. No. The squad, all of that.
Tear it down. Yeah. Tear it all down. It's so corrupt. It's corrupt to the core. It's like an apple, right? Where you think about, that analogy of a rotten apple. It is. It's like you go to the core and it's still rotten. You can't reform that. You need to just rebuild, eliminate it. Like what they're doing to Time's Up, actually, they just broke it down. And I don't know how they're going to build it back up, but they had to get rid of everyone on that board, all the founders. They had to get rid of the corruption. And same thing
Politically,
with
though,
the
that's going to
the
be
Democratic National Committee is just they're a tool. They're a oligarch,
corporation.
American oligarch tool for war.
Yeah, and they're a corporation,
Mhm.
essentially. I mean, not essentially, actually. I mean, they've the corruption too is not hard to find. I mean, they've admitted it in court papers, specifically with regards to Bernie Sanders and that whole, with
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton. And yet again, the problem that people don't know about it because we have a corrupt media, a for-profit corrupt media that, when we hear about, oh well, Russia state, state TV in Russia and stuff, we sort of have that here, except it's corporations and the ruling class that control
Well, of
things.
course, yeah. You have PBS. I mean, in England, you have BBC. Those are all government funded. PBS here, NPR, and those are tools of they get grants and U.S. funding and millionaire billionaire funding to do what they want them to do. And NPR was one of the worst. Like when I was trying to come forward with my story, they were terrible. I mean, they just did not want anything bad said about Joe Biden. And to this day, they still don't. Look at the New Yorker. Oh my God. I used to love the New Yorker. I can't even read it anymore. All it is bashing Trump and holding up Biden, holding him up as much as they possibly can. It's with these East Coast intellectuals that don't give a shit about workers who are struggling and having a hard time, much less the rape that any of these US senators or US Congress people have committed in their past or in present, right? And they don't care because, like you said earlier at the top of the hour when you were talking in your monologue, we are living in a raped culture. It's considered the norm. So you have like the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Washington Post, these legacy media that are answering to a very wealthy clientele who are very out of touch and don't give a shit because all they're interested in is keeping their power and their wealth. And they're going to do whatever they have to do to keep that narrative going. I mean, look at Vogue. Vogue just had Zelensky and his wife in that awful photo shoot. And then in the same article, in the same magazine, and Vogue did a rehabilitation of Stephen Bandera. Stephen Bandera was a Nazi. He killed thousands, 33,000 at least, Jews. He was directly responsible for killing and masterminding killing. And they're whitewashing it. I mean, Vogue magazine, but of course they align themselves with Hitler back in the day. So, like Igor Lepononik pointed that out. Yeah, so you're dealing with a ruling class that's not only corrupt but racist in many ways.
And they don't care. They don't pick sides. But it's the bottom line. That's all they care about.
Well, hedging the bets on both sides.
Yeah. And well, look at the American Israeli political, not political, public. I wanted to call them a political action committee, but political affairs committee. They've got their hands in both piles. I mean, they're funding 100 and something number of Republicans who still contest the election results.
Yeah.
And I mean, but who they will not fund is anybody that's progressive that speaks out on behalf of Palestine. I mean,
yeah, I just shared. There's a Google worker a group of them who have just are leaving Google because of the contract that they have with Israel, and they're saying that Google is inherently anti-Palestinian and racist, and they're and the woman that made the tweet, she said, look, I'm Jewish and I can't stand by this. This is wrong. And it's some sort of surveillance contract they're making with Israel, which is really scary, right? Like we need more surveillance, in tech.
Well, I mean, look at the United States, I mean, we're becoming a surveillance nation where we already have.
I'm drinking water and I didn't mean to product place.
Oh no,
I was
that's
trying to
fine.
hide the label of the water because I was like, no, I don't want to like product place water on your podcast. But I had to grab some water right before I came.
Hey,
But
if
yeah,
Tyrolee
I'm
approves of
actually
it,
getting ready in a few minutes to go get ready for a podcast, my podcast, The Politics of Survival. So I'm very happy about that. So.
yes. Talk more about that.
Well, I started that podcast and, I don't know tech. So that was daunting. And then I was writing for RT and RT produced it. But then the day that Lee Camp lost his, I don't know if you know Lee
Oh
Camp's
yeah, Lee
podcast that
Camp
he had
redacted.
redacted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got all pulled down. Mine was pulled down from Spotify, Google. I was just completely censored and my podcasts were all pulled down. So then INN, Independent News Network, Indie, approached me with Reef and said, look, we'll help you for free, because I didn't have money to pay them. And they wanted to build a network of independent content creators, at INN. And that's what they've done. And they've lifted up a lot of really good people. Like, Jesse Jett did my theme song, and he's this amazing activist musician. And he has a show now, and he also did the theme to my show. And I mean, it's been nice to have a community too. Like I'll pop in and I'll say, okay, I have this thing coming up, and then everyone will share it because I'm pretty suppressed. So it's hard for me to share anything on social media. And I don't even have a Facebook or a Instagram at this point. I just deleted them because of all the hate against Russia, and they were allowing really bad hate language. And I just said, I'm deleting my.
Well,
So
and they like to put that late. And I just saw this for the first time. I don't know how long it's been going on, but somebody that I'm friends with on Facebook, I noticed this little label underneath of his post saying something about Facebook considers this may be Russian affiliated. And I'm like, this is the most benign post I can imagine. You got to be kidding. So now they're apparently posting this stuff.
That's why I don't bother on Facebook. It's just not even worth the energy or effort. I mean, to be on there, but also, the fact that they would say it's okay to talk about killing Russians and somehow rationalize that.
I know.
That's I don't want to participate in a platform that engages in that. Like I won't. And
Yeah,
maybe like Instagram, I guess I kind of miss because I talk to people that I normally wouldn't talk to, artists and creators, because that tend to be on Instagram. So I miss Instagram, but again, they were doing the same thing, and I can't stand that kind of bigotry and xenophobia. I mean, and where does it end?
Well, yeah, it's just a breeding ground. I mean,
Yeah.
and we've seen that, and that's why again, it's really hard for me to be hopeful. I believe in humanity, but
Yeah.
we have to get back to that.
Yeah, so the politics of survival. I just had Igor on there. He works with Oliver Stone. Like he did the Snowden movie and the Putin interviews and Ukraine on Fire. That was Igor. He's a director and producer, and he works closely with him. So I had him on. I've had tonight. I'm having Pasta from Convo Couch on.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to be talking. And see, again, like I'm not politically affiliated, and I know he's seen more of as a libertarian, but I think his views are really interesting. He went and observed elections in Nicaragua. I want to hear about that. He's works closely with Fee, whom I adore, Fiorella Isabel, and she's over right now in Moscow working. And so I have like a different eclectic guests, from all over. I had the whistleblower for SeaWorld on, Jeffrey Venture. He was really an interesting,
Yes.
interview. And I say interview, but it's more of a conversation because I'm not a journalist. I don't have that training. I'm a writer,
But
but I like to
again,
have a
you are
conversation.
what you, just like Katie Halper, to me, are a journalist because you're doing what a journalist should be doing, right? I mean, you're not pegging people into, I'm only going to talk to you if you share this political perspective.
Right.
And that's the problem with a lot of our society right now is that every single thing has become political. And
Yeah.
what you agree with and what you don't agree with has got nothing to do with facts or objectivity. It's partisan. Which team are you on? And By the way, I love orcas. I love marine mammals, and so that interview was fantastic. And
Oh, you saw that? Oh,
I,
okay.
I don't know if I saw the full thing, but there's so
He's
many.
really cool. He's really cool. And I
He
mean,
is.
I mean, he talked about too, he's building a yurt, which I've lived in a yurt before. They're awesome. I love yurts. And he's, doing sustainable. I mean, he's not just talking about stuff, he's doing it in his daily life. He's pretty, I thought that was one of my, I love that interview. That was a really fun
Yeah,
one.
I started following him on Twitter actually after that, and
Mhm.
there's the name is escaping me, but there's another. He used to be the trainer for Flipper.
I don't know. I don't know the name.
Oh my God, he's been a hero of mine for so long, and I can't believe I just forgot his name. But anyhow, he my producer's gonna kill me when.
That's okay.
But I wish I could remember his name. But he actually wrote a book, and he's become a huge activist. He used to work for what used to, I guess it's Marineland, where in Florida. I think they
Yeah.
may have changed names, but we need more whistleblowers to
Yeah, yeah,
to
to
expose this
because
stuff.
they're sentient beings and they don't have a voice. They're just trapped. I mean, the some of the stuff that went on that he told me about was just like, oh, and I'm a big animal activist, as you know, so I
Yes.
really care about, like, I care about oceans. I care about, wild horses very deeply. I have a horse that I adopted, and I'm actually researching an article because I want to release an article probably on my Substack. And if anyone of your listeners wants to know, you can find me on Substack. You can find audio versions of my podcast, and also I write. I haven't been right. I'm going to start writing more. I've been kind of taking a break from some of the writing, but I'm researching an article on why we're killing wild horses. We're killing out the whole strains of wild horses, and so I was doing a piece on that, and I want to just bring awareness because people think this adopt program that the federal government has, this adoption Mustang program, is this great thing, but actually, a huge percentage of the horses that are adopted are actually given to kill buyers that sell them for meat, so they're not rescued. So it's
Yeah, what we're
um,
doing to animals on this is the whole
yeah,
thing is just tragic. Now
yeah.
you're in the Pacific Northwest, right?
I am. I am. So I focus my activism or my platform, however small it is, on helping survivors, pushing back on Russophobia, talking about anti-imperialism and animal activism. And those are that's kind of my little wheelhouse. And, not that I always stay in my lane,
Well,
but
but again, that's kind of what I love about you and all these other people too, is that there is no lane, right? I
right.
mean, the lane should be at least where truth is.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that you had to go get ready for your show, so I don't want to keep you. You've been so generous with your time, and I thank you so much. When you agreed to come on the show, I was just ecstatic, and I've been very nervous too because, um, like I said, I've admired you, and I think you're a hero. Um,
Oh, thank you.
I really do. The work that you've done, coming, I, that's what I want people to take away from this. You really jeopardized so much of your life, not for political, for none of that, but to speak out for other women. And I
And
mean,
men.
and then right, and
Yeah.
when I shared that story about my producer, right,
Yeah.
this morning, I asked her, I'm like, would you please put that in the monologue? I want you to, I want you to write that portion because I think it's important. But it was hard to read. It's just I was raised by a single mother, and I don't know, maybe that's shaped my views. But when I hear people say, or even like they'll say, well, no, but what Tara Reid is talking about back then, that's just, it's not that Joe Biden was blah, blah, blah. It's just that's the way it was back then. It was okay. It was never, ever,
No,
ever okay.
it
None of it
shouldn't be
was.
okay.
And they knew that back then. What kind of perverted morals must you have to have at any time frame to think that kind of thing is like, it's just sexual harassment, never okay. It never was okay. And for somebody to not know that, that's a moral failure on their part.
Yeah, and I'm really sorry that your producer went through that, and so many women and men actually that I've talked to have gone through that. And one of the things is that men, because of the shame, we were talking about that earlier, and I guess I wanted to touch on that just for a second.
Yes, please.
People don't need to feel shame. They tried to shame me about what happened to me, slut shame me about what I was wearing. They did all the rape myths, right? And then they even tried to class shame me, right? Because I was poor. I have no problems talking about my economic struggles. Everyone in America that I know, almost, unless you're part of the elite, they're having their own struggles. And even if you are pretty okay, if you get hit with a medical bill right now,
Oh,
it can
goodness.
throw your life into a very different reality. And so everyone, is dealing with their own pain in that regard. But what my point is that for survivors, there's no perfect survivor. There's no perfect victim, right? It's just, you are who you are. They didn't have a lot to latch on because I'm kind of boring in the sense that I don't party, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do some of the things they can latch on to and say, oh, she's this or she's this. I wasn't. So, and I was a professional and I had a law degree and I was an expert witness for, domestic violence prevention. And so what did they do? They went after this false thing that I lied about my education when I did not. And I proved that I didn't lie. And then they exposed the fact that I was in a domestic violence relationship as if it was something I should be ashamed of. No, I'm not. I survived it and protected my daughter. And that's what I should have done. And that's what I did. There's nothing. So just what I would say to survivors is, if you choose to go down this path, which is difficult to reveal publicly, just stand in your truth and don't be ashamed of who you are. You control the narrative. Take it back. And that's what I did by writing my book. And that's what I'm doing with the podcast.
And please, people, the book is fantastic.
Thank you.
I mean, I learned so much about you. I mean, you as an actress, you almost you were accepted in a Juilliard. But
yes.
I mean, your life is just fascinating, and this book is just, again, it only took me a few days to read it.
Thanks.
And absolutely loved it. Parts of it were hard to read, obviously. But if anyone who's interested in the truth, or even if you want to dismiss the claim, whatever, read the book, get the full story, get Tara's, am I saying your name right, Tara?
It's Tara, the Irish pronunciation. Yeah, that's okay. Tara is American way of pronouncing it, is Tara, yeah.
But please, get Tara's book, and just, it's a fascinating story about her life, and it talks a lot about rape culture. And where can people, I want to ask you two quick questions before you leave. Where can people find and learn more about you, get your podcast and stuff? We're going to put the Linktree link up.
Okay.
But also, if there's somebody out there that's dealing with sexual assault, where would you direct them to?
Resources right now are difficult. I would, of course, go to the hotline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline. I know RAINN, I used to recommend that, but I know they're having some difficulties right now. So just approach with caution. And that's what I would do, for right now. And you can find me at Reed Alexandra on Twitter, and then on Telegram, it's Tara Reed Author. And I do have my DMs open, so you're welcome to DM me, and I can give you a few, personal links of places that I feel are safe. But there's a lot of problems, like after the Time's Up experience, I'm very cautious now when I recommend anything. Because that was, not all nonprofits have survivors' interests in mind. So yeah, the Linktree is really the best way to get all my links to my podcast and to the book. And the podcast, The Politics of Survival, is usually on every Monday live, either in the morning or in the evening, depending on if my guest is from overseas. And when they're from overseas, it's usually like 11 in the morning Pacific.
What time is it going to be tonight?
7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. So Thank you for having me and
Hey, thank you for
all of
coming
that.
on. Believe me, my pleasure. And I'll be watching you, tuning into your podcast hopefully tonight. Good luck with the
Yeah.
show.
Thank you
And
for all the work you're doing and for raising up survivors, and your producer as well. You guys are awesome, and you have my support. So reach out anytime.
I will. Thank you so much. Again, Matt, can we put up the book so people can get the link one more time? Left Out, when the truth doesn't fit in. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank Tara Reid. Please tune into her podcast. I'm going to let her go because she's got a show to produce, and I know how much how that can be.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. This has been
Thank you.
truly, this has been an honor.
The honor's been mine. You take care.
You too.
All right.
Bye bye now.
Bye bye.
We'll see you next Tuesday on Crusade of America. Thank you for watching.